Prince Andrew's character has long been in question.
In London, the police who protect Buckingham Palace are dealing with a royal blunder.
I speak to you today with feelings of profound sorrow.
The British royal family stands at a crossroads nobody saw coming. Behind the golden gates and centuries of tradition, a secret has been dragged into the light, one that no amount of protocol or power could keep buried. Prince Andrew, a name already stained by scandal.
Prince Andrew has reached an out-of-court settlement with the woman who accused him of assaulting her when she was 17.
Now faces something far more personal and permanent. A DNA test has confirmed what many suspected, but nobody could prove. Somewhere in Scotland, a man has spent 42 years of his life wondering about his father's identity. And now the answer has arrived with scientific certainty. The palace released a statement, brief and shocking, that has sent shockwaves across the globe. This isn't about politics or protocol anymore. This is about blood, truth, and a secret that refused to stay hidden. Stay with us as we reveal every detail of this explosive royal revelation that has left the nation speechless. The rumors that refused to fade away. Long before lawyers got involved, long before DNA labs and official statements, there were stories. They lived in the shadows of internet forums and the margins of gossip columns. People whispered about Prince Andrew and a hidden chapter from his past. These weren't the usual royal rumors about affairs or disagreements. This was something deeper, something that involved a child who supposedly grew up far from the palace walls. At first, nobody gave these tales much weight. The royal family has always attracted speculation, and most of it turns out to be baseless fiction. But these particular rumors had staying power. They kept resurfacing year after year with slightly different details, but the same core claim. Prince Andrew had fathered a child decades ago, and that child had been kept secret through a combination of money and silence. The timeline people constructed pointed to the early 1980s, before Andrew married Sarah Ferguson, during his years as a young naval officer.
For years, the relationship between Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson has captivated the public.
Back then, he was considered one of the most eligible bachelors in Britain. Charming, adventurous, and living a lifestyle that offered plenty of opportunity for romantic entanglements. According to the whispers, one of those relationships resulted in a pregnancy, and arrangements were quietly made to ensure the child would be raised away from public scrutiny. For years, the palace said nothing. Their strategy has always been simple: ignore the noise, and eventually it fades. But this time, the noise didn't fade. If anything, it grew louder, especially after Prince Andrew's reputation collapsed following his connection to Jeffrey Epstein and that infamous television interview where his explanations seemed to create more questions than answers. People who study online behavior noticed something interesting happening. Amateur investigators began connecting dots, old photographs, charity event records, snippets from books written by former palace staff. None of it was concrete evidence, but together it painted a picture that many found convincing. The more the palace stayed silent, the more people assumed there must be something to hide. Then came the turning point. About 8 months ago, the rumors transformed into something the palace could no longer ignore. Someone stepped forward with a legal petition demanding a DNA test. This wasn't an anonymous internet user making claims. This was a real person with real lawyers requesting scientific proof of paternity. The game had changed completely. Alexander Campbell, the son who simply wanted truth. The man behind the legal action turned out to be the opposite of someone seeking fame or fortune. Alexander Campbell, a 42-year-old architect living in Edinburgh, had built a respectable life entirely on his own merits. He wasn't connected to high society, didn't move in celebrity circles, and had never sought attention from the media. His childhood was ordinary in most ways. Raised by a single mother who worked with various charitable organizations, Alexander grew up knowing that his father wasn't part of the picture. Like many children in similar situations, he asked questions when he was young. But his mother's answers were always vague, evasive, wrapped in language that discouraged further inquiry. Eventually, he stopped asking. He went to university, studied architecture, and carved out a successful career designing buildings across Scotland. Friends and colleagues described him as thoughtful, private, and dedicated to his work. He married, started a family of his own, and seemed content with the life he'd built. But there was always an empty space in his personal history, a question mark where other people had a complete family tree. Everything changed 2 years ago when his mother became terminally ill. In those final weeks, she made a confession that would alter the course of Alexander's life. She told him that during the early 1980s, she had been romantically involved with Prince Andrew. The relationship was brief but genuine, she insisted. When she discovered she was pregnant, she was approached by people connected to the royal household. An agreement was arranged. She would receive financial support in exchange for her silence and a promise to raise the child far from royal circles. She had kept that promise for more than 4 decades. But now, facing death, she felt her son deserved to know the truth. She gave him what documentation she had: a few letters, some old photographs, records of payments that had been made to a private account over the years. It wasn't conclusive proof, but it was enough to make Alexander believe her story. After she passed away, Alexander struggled with how to handle this information. He wasn't interested in disrupting the royal family or claiming any kind of inheritance. He simply wanted confirmation. Was the story his mother told him true? Was Prince Andrew really his biological father? He attempted to make contact through private channels first. His lawyers sent carefully worded letters to representatives of the Duke of York, requesting a discreet conversation and offering to handle the matter with complete confidentiality. Weeks passed with no response. More letters were sent. Still nothing. The palace, it seemed, had no intention of engaging with his claims. Left with no other option, Alexander authorized his legal team to file a formal petition in court.
The royal rumor mill is buzzing.
The request was straightforward: a DNA test to establish paternity. His lawyers emphasized that this wasn't about money or titles. It was about identity, about a fundamental human right to know one's biological origins. When the media got wind of the legal filing, they descended on Alexander's life looking for scandal or ulterior motives. Instead, they found a man who declined most interview requests and continued going to work every day. His neighbors expressed surprise at the attention, describing him as quiet and unassuming. Even people who had known him for years had no idea about the claim he was making against the royal family. This restraint, this obvious discomfort with the spotlight, made his case more credible. He wasn't performing for cameras or selling his story to tabloids. He was simply a man seeking answers about his own existence. Inside the palace, crisis and calculation. The petition landed on the desks of royal lawyers like a grenade. King Charles, still navigating the early years of his reign, had been working to streamline the monarchy and repair its public image. Prince William, similarly focused on modernizing the institution for future generations, had already distanced himself from his uncle's various controversies.
Condemnation piling on. Prince Andrew excoriated in just about every major British newspaper today.
Now, both men faced a situation that threatened to overshadow all their careful planning. Prince Andrew's response was predictably defensive. He viewed the entire matter as an invasion of privacy, another attack from people determined to destroy what remained of his reputation. He wanted to fight the petition, to refuse the test on principle. But the legal advisors made the reality clear. Refusing would be interpreted as an admission of guilt. The public would assume he was hiding something, and the story would dominate headlines for months or even years. Prince William reportedly argued strongly in favor of cooperation. He understood that the monarchy's survival depended on public trust, and that trust was already badly damaged. Refusing a simple DNA test would make the entire institution look guilty, not just Andrew. The decision, though painful, had to be about protecting the crown, not protecting one man's pride. King Charles agreed with his son. The test would proceed, but under conditions that ensured absolute accuracy and prevented any accusations of manipulation. Both sides would have legal representation present during sample collection. An internationally respected laboratory would conduct the analysis. Every step would be documented with forensic precision. The facility chosen was the Sterling Genetics Institute in Geneva, Switzerland. The lab had handled high-profile paternity cases before and had an impeccable reputation for neutrality and scientific rigor. Swiss law also provided strong privacy protections, which meant the details of the testing process could be kept confidential until the results were ready. On the appointed day, Prince Andrew provided his DNA sample at a secure royal residence. Medical professionals, witnessed by lawyers from both sides, collected cells from inside his cheek using sterile swabs. The samples were immediately sealed in tamper-evident containers, labeled with identification codes rather than names, and placed in a locked case. Alexander Campbell underwent the same process in Edinburgh, with equal levels of security and documentation. His samples received identical handling and were sealed with the same protocols. Both sets of samples were then transported to Geneva by diplomatic courier. The chain of custody was maintained with the kind of precision normally reserved for transporting state secrets. Every person who touched the containers signed off on the transfer. Every movement was logged and time-stamped. At the Sterling Institute, senior geneticists began their analysis. They examined 21 different genetic markers, specific locations on the DNA strands where patterns repeat in predictable ways. Every person inherits half of these markers from their mother and half from their father. By comparing Alexander's paternal markers with Prince Andrew's genetic profile, the scientists could determine with extraordinary precision whether a biological relationship existed. The lab technicians worked methodically, running each test multiple times to eliminate any possibility of error. They had no idea whose DNA they were analyzing. The samples were identified only by reference numbers, but they understood the importance of their work from the security measures surrounding it. After several days of careful analysis and verification, the results were conclusive. The genetic markers aligned with perfect consistency. The probability of paternity came back at 99.999%, the highest certainty level achievable with current DNA technology. In scientific terms, there was no doubt. Prince Andrew was Alexander Campbell's biological father. The findings were compiled into a formal report, signed by the laboratory director and sealed in an envelope designed to show any tampering. That envelope was then hand-delivered back to London by secure courier and placed directly into the hands of the legal representatives who had commissioned the test. The statement that shook a nation. The envelope was opened in a private room at St. James's Palace. Present were the King's private secretary, Prince Andrew's chief legal counsel, and a neutral court official. The room fell silent as the report was read aloud. The language was clinical and precise, exactly what you'd expect from a scientific document. But the implications were earth-shattering. The royal family had less than 24 hours to prepare their response before the results would be shared with Alexander Campbell's legal team, after which a leak became almost inevitable. A marathon crisis meeting convened immediately, pulling in communications experts, senior advisors, and members of the immediate royal family. The debate was intense. Some argued for a comprehensive statement that acknowledged the situation with compassion and took responsibility for the years of absence. Others pushed for minimal comment, worried that saying too much would open the door to further legal complications or invite additional claims from other people who might see an opportunity. In the end, caution won out. The statement released by Buckingham Palace was remarkably brief.
To bring you breaking news, it is with deep sadness that Buckingham Palace has announced
just 2 sentences confirming that DNA testing had occurred and that the results showed a biological connection between Prince Andrew and Alexander Campbell. No apology, no expression of regret, No acknowledgement of the emotional weight of the revelation. Just bare facts delivered in the coldest possible language. The statement was released at 6 o'clock in the evening, timed to hit the late news cycle. Within minutes, it became the only story that mattered. News networks interrupted their regular programming. Social media platforms crashed temporarily under the weight of traffic. The phrase, "Prince Andrew's son," trended worldwide within an hour. Outside Buckingham Palace, crowds began to gather despite the late hour. Some were curious tourists who happened to be nearby. Others were British citizens who felt compelled to witness this historic moment in person. Television cameras captured their reactions: shock, anger, disbelief, and in some cases, a kind of grim satisfaction that their suspicions had been validated. The following morning, Prince Andrew released his own statement through his spokesperson. It was carefully constructed by lawyers, every word chosen to minimize legal exposure. He acknowledged the test results and stated that he would handle the matter privately with those involved. He asked for privacy and offered no further comment. The public reaction to this second statement was even harsher than the response to the palace announcement. People expected at least a gesture toward the human element of the story. Some recognition that a man had spent his entire life not knowing his father, some acknowledgement of the pain that must have caused. Instead, they got legal language and a request to be left alone. Social media lit up with criticism. Commentators across the political spectrum condemned the coldness of the response. Even traditionally pro-monarchy voices expressed disappointment. This wasn't about protecting the institution anymore. This was about basic human decency, and Prince Andrew had failed the test. The aftermath: damage without end. The days following the confirmation brought wave after wave of consequences. Petitions calling for Prince Andrew to be completely stripped of his Duke of York title gathered hundreds of thousands of signatures within 48 hours. Members of Parliament from multiple parties issued statements condemning his handling of the situation and calling for his removal from any official records or ceremonies. Within the royal family itself, the mood was reportedly one of fury and despair. King Charles had spent years trying to rehabilitate the monarchy's image.
Heir to the throne since he was 3 years old, Prince Charles just became Great Britain's new monarch at the age of 73. It was the beginning of a life preparing for his role as future king,
to make it relevant and respected in the 21st century. Prince William had worked alongside him, carefully crafting his own public image as a modern royal who understood accountability and service. Now, once again, Prince Andrew had undermined all of that work. Sources close to the family described William as particularly angry, feeling that his uncle's scandals had become an anchor dragging down the entire institution. There were reports of tense conversations between the brothers and their father, with William allegedly pushing for even stronger action against Andrew, including complete severance from the family's public life. For Alexander Campbell, the confirmation brought the answers he'd sought, but at an enormous personal cost. His quiet life in Edinburgh was shattered. Reporters camped outside his home. His workplace was besieged with requests for interviews. Photographers followed him on his daily routines, hoping to capture images that could be analyzed and compared to photos of Prince Andrew at the same age. Through his lawyers, Alexander released a brief statement expressing relief that the truth had been established and requesting privacy for himself and his family as they processed this life-changing information. He reiterated that he had never sought titles, money, or public attention, only the truth about his parentage. Legal experts began analyzing the potential ramifications of the DNA confirmation. As an illegitimate child, Alexander had no automatic claim to royal titles or a place in the succession line. British law is clear on this point. Only legitimate children born to married parents have those rights. However, he might have grounds to pursue a share of Prince Andrew's personal wealth, depending on how aggressively he wanted to push the matter. Most observers believed Alexander had no interest in such a legal battle. Everything about his behavior suggested a man who simply wanted acknowledgement, not compensation. But the possibility remained. adding another layer of uncertainty to an already complicated situation. The broader implications for the monarchy became a subject of intense debate. Royal historians pointed out that this scandal was different from previous royal controversies because it involved irrefutable scientific proof. There was no room for interpretation or spin. The DNA didn't lie, and that made the decades of silence feel even more damning. Constitutional experts raised questions about transparency and accountability. If something this significant could be hidden for 40 years, what else might be concealed? How much trust could the public reasonably place in an institution that operated with such secrecy? These questions didn't have easy answers, but they needed to be asked. Comparisons were drawn to other defining moments in royal history: the abdication crisis of 1936, the divorce of Charles and Diana, the death of Princess Diana herself. But many argued this scandal cut deeper because it wasn't about love, duty, or even tragedy. It was about deception, abandonment, and a failure to acknowledge basic human responsibility. Prince Andrew's legacy was now irreversibly defined by scandal. His association with Jeffrey Epstein, the disastrous Newsnight interview, and now the revelation of a secret son he'd never acknowledged, these would be the first lines of his obituary, the way history would remember him. Whatever contributions he'd made during his years of royal service were completely overshadowed. The monarchy itself would survive, as it had survived countless crises over centuries. But this scandal would leave a permanent mark, a reminder that even institutions built on tradition and bloodlines cannot escape accountability in an age of scientific truth and public transparency. The story of Prince Andrew and Alexander Campbell is more than a royal scandal. It's a battle between tradition and truth. DNA doesn't respect crowns or secrecy. It exposes what's real. For Alexander, truth came at a heavy price. For Andrew, it marked the fall of a tarnished name. And for the monarchy, it reopened questions buried behind palace walls. The crown will move forward, but its image is forever changed. In this new age, transparency, not power, defines legacy. If you believe truth should always triumph, stay with us and subscribe for more unfolding royal revelations.